The constituency was in good hands. Catherine O'Regan had taken over my old parliamentary seat. So I had some time for intensive research, and I set off to try to unscramble the codes of global economics. When I came to New York, to the UN library, I didn't really have much idea what I expected to find. It was just that this is where the search kept leading me. Everyone kept saying, well, there are a set of rules, and they're called the United Nations System of National Accounts. And if you want to read the full set, this is where you've got to come. And every day or two, I'd find yet another truly horrendous paragraph that meant I had to keep going. The worst day of all was when I discovered the paragraph, subsistence production and the consumption of their own produce by non-primary producers is of little or no importance. What this really means is that the work of non-primary producers, housewives, mothers, who are bearing and raising children, doing laundry, making home preserves, keeping a herb garden. In fact, most of the work that women do in an unpaid capacity, anywhere on the planet, macroeconomically, is of little or no importance. Well, after, I guess, about 2 months of reading through the System of National Accounts, you can start to believe you're slightly crazed or that you're not reading things properly, because the distortions between what is in the rules and what is real life that you observe is so extreme that I kept thinking I'm still missing something. And so again, I went to talk to John Kenneth Galbraith and said to me, look, for goodness sake, write it. Stop talking about this. You've know enough. You've read enough. Just write it.
Well, I'm very proud of that. I have quite a few visits, so not all are strong in my memory, but I certainly remember her coming to see me. We had a long talk, I guess more than one, about the role of women in the economic system. The whole tendency in economics is to take the monetary economy, the pecuniary economy, not only as the basic thing to be measured. If there isn't money involved, if there isn't a price, you don't measure it. And that leaves women's work in the household and a great deal of child care and so forth out of the national accounts. There it is enormously productive work, both for human enjoyment and for the welfare of the economy and the growth of the economy, that doesn't get counted. And it was this that Marilyn was concerned with, as indeed I would like to think I have been.
The system was developed by John Maynard Keynes and Richard Stone, based on a pamphlet they wrote called, literally, The British National Income and How to Pay for the War. And this became the basis of national income accounting. It's called the United Nations System of National Accounts, and to a significant extent, it governs all our lives. All nations must conform to these rules of economic measurement, or they cannot belong to the United Nations. They cannot borrow from the World Bank or secure any loans from the International Monetary Fund. Important decisions are made with these figures, decisions which will determine whose needs are met first. Decisions on how to spend your tax dollar. Decisions on killing the planet. Decisions on who will live or die. These measurements do not include everything. They are highly selective, though of course they maintain a pretense of objectivity. So what is included and excluded in this system? The system includes everything that goes through the marketplace. Everything which has a cash-generating capacity. In other words, the system recognizes no value other than money. Regardless of how that money is made. This means that there is no value to peace. This means that there is no value to the preservation of natural resources for future generations. This means there is no value to unpaid work, including the unpaid work of reproducing human life itself, including the unpaid work of women who feed and nurture their own families. This system cannot respond to values it refuses to recognize. This system leaves out the work of half the population of the planet and the planet itself. It is the cause of massive poverty, illness and death of millions of women and children, and it is encouraging environmental disaster. This is an economic system that can eventually kill us all.
Marilyn Waring's no-nonsense approach to parliamentary politics earned her respect early. In just her second term, she was appointed chairperson of the prestigious Public Expenditure Committee, a position from which she aired criticism of the effectiveness of controls on government spending, the accountability of politicians, and the dead hand of bureaucracy.
In a small country like New Zealand, this is the sole budget, appropriations, public accounts committee of a parliament. So we review everything in terms of the whole 45 government ministries and departments and trading divisions. And of course you can imagine that the situation is about 9 men, in their suits with me, the small junior at the end of the table, faced by treasury officials or departmental officials at the other end of the table. And I developed the art of the dumb question. I was amazed all the time they would wheel in out these papers. And the difficulty was they were all full of jargon, economic phrases, and I didn't understand what they meant. So I would wait until it was my turn, and I would say, "What does so-and-so mean?" And they would give you an answer. And I'd say, do you have any English that you can explain that in, any real words? And I can still recall, interchanges when they were briefing me in my office, and they would teach me something, and I would say, "But that's preposterous," or "That's crazy," or "That's ludicrous." And they would say to me, "Oh, well, yes, it is, but those are the rules." And I couldn't believe that these enormous paradoxes or pathologies that I was discovering were part of an international economic system. I thought, maybe it's just we make bad policy in New Zealand. Other countries started to invite me there as their guest. And when you went there, you could ask to see their chairpeople of public accounts committees, their treasury boards, their budget appropriations committees. And I began to realise, hey, it's nothing to do with New Zealand. These are the rules everywhere. And I developed very early a kind of, it was a personal technique, which was in any community that I went into, I'd asked until I was introduced to a woman my age. And I would try and develop a trust in that situation. And then on a number of occasions, spend an entire day with her, you know, telling my little tape recorder what she was doing all the time and taking photographs of her. Well, Tendai was a 14-year-old who lived in the Lurveld in Zimbabwe. And I'm interested in the work days of young women because the International Labour Organization specifies that under 14-year-olds don't work. You've got to realise that in many cultures don't think in terms of morning, afternoon and evening. So the easiest way is just to draw a line in the dirt, mark a point where, you know, the village is, get the sun coming up, the sun at like a midpoint in the morning, the sun directly above the village, and going down in the afternoon, and sunset, and then just stars out in the night time, and then you just sit quietly for however long it takes and work through, you know. When the sun is here, what are you doing? When it's moved to this point, what are you doing? When it's right high in the sky above the village, what's happening then? As it's coming down in the afternoon, where are you? How far from the village are you? At sunrise, at sunset, what's happening then? And when the stars finally come out at night, are you asleep yet or are you still working? There's no leisure in these periods at all, and we're speaking of 16 to 18-hour days every day of the week. And all of the activities that they're involved in this time are unrecorded. They're called non-productive, they're called uneconomic. These women are apparently at leisure during these enormously work-filled days. Time is the one primary thing we all have to exchange. And time use best describes women's lives anyway. There's no reason why we could not do major census surveys in terms of time use, just as we do census surveys for income. These time use surveys were conducted in Pakistan. You can record time use so easily and immediately see the differences in the lifestyles between women and men. You can see here straight away that men engage in about 5 different activities during a day, and that women in about a dozen, that they are continually broken. In addition, you've got to remember that most of these activities are going to be simultaneous with childcare or food preparation. You can see that men's days are much, much shorter than women's. Don't be confused by where these lines are. All of this orange colour is leisure and personal activities. And you'll notice that there's so little of that in respect of women's activities here. When we analysed this in terms of time use, we found that the most exacting activity that took the most time was that for women, for 5 hours every day, they were involved in food preparation and cooking, primarily cooking. And what that demonstrated to us was the complete inefficiency of their tulas, or their cooking stoves. Now, if you want to increase the productivity of this village, the particular technology change that is needed then are new stoves. This is where the priorities lie, and it lies in cutting down that time. In Pakistan, the women needed stoves. In Kenya, the technology priority is inexpensive water pumps to save the women time every day.
kutuka pekenya na nedoyio enkolong enaas enkito kaiteru ore tedekenya nang'as aiteru eyiarare tedekenya naa enaara ayierishore duo nayawua amu ore peekenyu subuhi namaisuj inkonyek kalo mail 5 enkare ore ake nanabai tenkare naiteru aituku enkerai esaa 5 peelo sukuul ore ake naituku enkerai esaa 5 peelo sukuul nayiaraki endaa peenya naitoki ayiaraki ena saa 10 nalotu endaa ore ake paidip nalo olchata amu enkima ainok naa enolchata ore paashukunye teine nebau enker naliki orkuo neitoki abau enkae saa esaa 12 nebau nkishu nalepisho ore endara pookin kaiguan ajo kaitaisere aikunari maili 5 paalaaki enkerai eshule enkare amu meeta neeku naas ometadoi enkolong.
And the translator asks, and what do the men do? A man in the crowd answers.
Neitaru aramat entoki pookin natii auluo oldong enkerai enkitok amu enenye. Ore peidip neitaru aing'uraki nkishu enyenak ilchekuti.
Ainyototo siyiok nikintoki aaning irpayiani metaa ore peekijoki orpayian shomo dakito shomo taasa esiai nijoki kaata sinanu enai naas.
It's perfectly obvious that the people who are visible to you as contributors to the economy are the people who will be visible when you make policy. And if you're not visible as a producer in a nation's economy, then you're going to be invisible in the distribution of benefits. And wherever I was, this was the world situation for women. It's becoming part of a global situation for me now. I mean, I'm able to make analogies between the unpaid rural women in Bangladesh or in the Philippines and the woman back in my constituency whose work is also invisible. The magnitude of the invisibility of women's work was a major lesson I learned from my parliamentary experience. For example, as a politician, it was virtually impossible for me to prove a need for childcare facilities. Mothers who are inactive and unoccupied cannot apparently be in need.
They screamed at my brother.
Did they?
What's your name?
Well, I'm Kathy Kyle, and I've been at this play centre for coming up a year. It's a time for the children to play, but it's also a time for the mother. It's a time when you can come and say, oh, I had a heck of a day, and you know I need a break, or come and have a coffee with somebody.
Well, I started off as a mother, and
Len?
yes.
I want vertex there.
Oh, do you think you can try snipping them up for me while I talk? Yes, early starts.
Chaos.
Yeah, med rushes and then calms. When I had 3 under 5, it was 3 under 3.5. It was a med rush all the time, but you just got into a routine and you just coped. And then as one went off to school, the pressure came off because you had a bit of time left during the day to actually do all those little jobs. And yes, you just become a very good time management person.
Going up the slide all day, Anthony.
Yeah,
you're always aware of what they're doing and where they are, and even when they're not there, that you're still sort of thinking, I hope they're all right, and I hope that, you know, you're still worrying about them all the time. You can be very isolated when you live and work in your own home. But when you come out here and you see that everyone else has sort of got screaming kids and dirty nappies and all the other good things that go with it as well, pretty, then you just sort of cope that much better at home because you know that you're not the only one that's doing this. You know, we're shaping the next generation, so it really does depend a lot on how we do it. Yes, I'll catch you.
When you leave work, it's the status of woman just goes boom, as according to society, but here we all take on jobs and we're valued for what we do, however small that role might be. So I think that's really important.
Kathy, a young, middle-class housewife, spends her days preparing food, setting the table, serving meals, clearing food and dishes from the table, washing dishes, ironing, keeping an eye on or playing with the children, dressing her children, disciplining children, taking the children to daycare or to school, disposing of garbage, dusting, gathering clothes for the washing, doing the laundry, going to the gas station and the supermarket, repairing household items, making beds, paying bills, sewing or mending or knitting, talking with door-to-door salespeople, cutting the grass, weeding, answering the telephone, vacuuming, sweeping and washing the floors, shoveling snow, cleaning the bathroom and kitchen and putting her children to bed. Kathy has to face the fact that she fills her time in a totally unproductive manner. She too is economically inactive and economists record her as unoccupied. Ben is a highly trained member of the US military. His regular duty is to descend to an underground facility where he waits with a colleague. When I wrote this, it was a colleague, but now, due to drug abuse in the US military, it's with two colleagues, for hours at a time for an order to fire a nuclear missile.
And insert the keys and strap into each chair. My key is inserted. At that point, we're hoping that another crew within the squadron is going to be turning keys the same way that we did. It takes two crews turning keys at the same time to actually launch the missiles. We work on a two-vote system, so the one vote will send a launch command. The missiles will wait for a second launch vote from another launch control center before they will actually launch. After that, it's automatic.
So skilled and effective is Ben that if his colleague were to attempt to subvert an order to fire, Ben would, if all else failed, be expected to kill him to ensure a successful missile launch.
Well, we're trained so highly in our recurring training that we take every month in simulators like this, so that if we actually had to do it, it would be an almost automatic thing. There wouldn't be time for any reflection until after we turn the keys.
Ben is in paid work. He is economically active. His work has value and contributes as part of the nuclear machine to the nation's growth, wealth, and productivity. There is no reason why tomorrow Canada or New Zealand could not establish time use surveys, because the one common denominator that all of us have, the one thing we might be said to choose to exchange, that is our own, is time. And time is a better description of the needs for intervention in people's lives than any other indicator. It shows you where the crisis points are. It shows you where the service needs are as a policymaker. In a study conducted by the Commission on the Status of Women in Canada, it was demonstrated that 2/3 of all primary health care took place in the home. If 2/3 of the budget for primary health care were directed towards those responsible for that care, imagine what would happen to that budget and how that budget would be redistributed and how the priorities would be turned on their head.
These are the kinds of effects, in a budgetary sense, that would flow from time use surveys. Why don't policymakers or politicians or bureaucrats like this idea? Well, first of all, it's terrifying. They would have to exercise judgment. They don't have a unidimensional set of figures to which they can look and say, is growth up or down? Thereby hangs our decision. Language is a tool available to all of us. None of you, when you leave this room, should ever again say, my mother doesn't work, my wife doesn't work. That particularly relates to people who are in media or teaching positions. Take your census form. It says, what is your primary occupation? Well, be inventive. Pick up the business pages of Saturday's paper. Be a logistics analyst. Be a management supervisor. Be anything that fits, the kinds of things that you do. Just don't be a housewife, don't be a home engineer, don't be anything that uses the word house or home in it. How many hours a week do you work? 96, 107, whatever it is. How many weeks a year do you work? 52. For whom do you work? Well, that's an exciting one. What's the name of your company? I found that women can be extremely inventive here. It's good fun mucking up the census. We've got that rolling in quite a few countries. Push for parity. Join political parties and go to their annual conferences and year after year after year drive them crazy. Half the candidates shall be women. Half the candidates shall be women. Join this party till you get it through, then move on to the next one. Just as there is no one-way feminism, there is no one political tactic available here. There is no one political strategy. It is broad and as wide as our imaginations can take it once we have heard and seen and recognised that the emperor has no clothes. You must choose, judge, assess the strategy and tactic in your environment, in those communities that I don't have access to, just as I do it in communities you won't have access to. The only principles are that we don't stop, that we are rigorous, that we recognise that it's hard work, and lastly and not least, that we have a lot of fun along the way.
Take your money, keep it, don't tell me who to become. Take your age-old wisdom with you to kingdom come. Degrees and all that education won't help me where I come from. Born and raised in a country beside the river, my home. Born and raised in a country beside the river, my home. And ain't life sweet when we know what we're doing? Ain't life sweet when we're not afraid to care? Ain't life sweet when we know what we're doing? Ain't life sweet when we're not afraid to care?